Welcome back to Campus Pressbox. This is episode number 33 of our podcast series. This is your host, Ben Belden, and I'm here with my friend, Danny Cunningham. Both of us are Notre Dame writers for Campus Pressbox. Danny, how you doing today?
I'm doing phenomenal. How are you, Ben?
Doing well. Can't complain. Let's just jump right into it. It's always a good week whenever, Notre Dame comes off a win. So talk to me a little bit about the Temple game. What are your key takeaways from that game?
I'm happy with the W. Anytime you go on the road, late game, primetime game, college game day was there, obviously, and you beat a ranked team, you have to be happy no matter how it happens. The team got out of it relatively healthy, I believe. No one showed up on the injury report Sunday, so that was a great thing. I'm happy. I know they didn't look as good as people hoped at times, but they won, and that's what matters in my book, so I'm cool with it.
Yeah, with this ND team, anytime you get out of a game without any key injuries, that's always a moral victory at the very least. I thought that, I started real optimistic about this game. Notre Dame came out, looked wonderful. Kaiser led a nice touchdown drive right there to start off the game. They're up 7-0. I was like, all right, this game is not going to be one of those games where I'm losing years off my life at the end. And I quickly found out that I was wrong in assuming such a thing. I think I've accepted at this point that nothing ever is going to be real easy for Notre Dame, at least not for a full 4 quarters. What do you think about that? Do you feel the same?
Yeah, and especially with the schedule, it's a tough schedule. I think there are 2 easy games that should be blowouts remaining on the schedule in Wake Forest and Boston College, but going to Pitt and going to Stanford are going to be 2 tough tests, and they're not going to be easy games. Obviously, I would much rather like if Notre Dame would have came in and just dominated in the first quarter, second quarter went just as well, and they were up maybe 28-3 or 28-7 at halftime. And the second half would not have been nearly as stressful for me, but that's the way it is. And when they win games on the road, that's how it's going to be. This year, we've seen Notre Dame doesn't exactly play well on the road. If you look at their road games at Virginia, they had the last minute score with 12 seconds left from Kaiser to Fuller. And at Clemson, that was a close loss at the end of the game. So it's not like they've thrived on the road the way they've played at home. We're going to have to be able to expect to see Notre Dame play in tight games on the road because they play good teams on the road.
Yeah, I mean, if we were talking about another team that has an easier schedule, like a team from basically any of the Power 5 conferences, no one really has a schedule that stands out like Notre Dame does, but you play, your B+ game as against a team like, a team like Maryland or something like that, then you're going to win by 3 or 4 touchdowns.
I know exactly who you're trying to attack, and I love it.
I mean, I guess you could interpret that for a couple different teams, but yeah, you're spot on. But anyways, so if you play your B+ game against a team like Maryland or something like that, then obviously you win by 3 or 4 touchdowns. Notre Dame doesn't have a lot of teams like Maryland on their schedule. So obviously you bring your B+ game against a team like Temple, who was undefeated, and we hadn't really seen. I mean, we had no measuring stick for how good Temple was until they played Notre Dame. And I guess they're better than really. I mean, I thought that it was. I'll be honest with you. I thought Notre Dame was covering that 10.5 point spread. I thought it was going to be a 2-touchdown win. It was going to be close for 2.5 quarters, and then Notre Dame was going to pull away. Stanford. I'm thinking ahead already. Temple was going to tack on a touchdown at the end of the game, and that's how it was going to be. But boy, was I wrong, and wish I wasn't. I just wish that for one single time that Notre Dame just didn't do this to me. But such is the life of a Notre Dame fan, I suppose.
Yeah, it is. And what people also have to remember is that Temple was a ranked team, and they were at the beginning of the year looking at Notre Dame's schedule. You would think, oh, they're probably Notre Dame's 10th toughest game or 9th toughest game behind like UMass and Wake Forest and Boston College. that turned out not to be the case. There aren't too many other teams that can say one of what you think should be one of their easiest games turns into a college game days there, 8:00 on ABC, matchup of ranked teams. Not many other schools have that happen to them. That's really a testament to how difficult Notre Dame's schedule is, that a team that was supposed to be your 10th toughest game is now a real tough game, and it's still probably not even in your top 5 as far as tough games go.
Yeah. One of the things that I was really entertained with as far as the Notre Dame Temple game was how right from the start you get those, hard New Philly. I'm struggling tonight. I'm not on it, but you get those hard Philly type of guys, those Jersey type of athletes that always have something to say. And right from the bat, you get guy like Will Fuller made a catch, I think on maybe even the first play of the game. And he gets up, and whoever the defensive back was already jawing at him. And Temple continued that jawing pretty well throughout the game, even after Notre Dame scored first. And it kind of looks like Notre Dame might start to pull away. You had Temple just jawing at him the whole time. And it was actually kind of fun to watch to see how Notre Dame responded. I was in the back of my mind kind of thinking like, all right, hopefully they don't put their money where their mouth is, but that was kind of fun to watch throughout the game. Do you notice any of that going on?
I did notice a lot of that, and I know you're speaking of number 1, the corner, I believe, was covering Will Fuller most of the night. And the one crazy thing is, I think you could have called Temple for pass interference on almost every pass play. They were that physical on the outside against Fuller and Corey Robinson and Chris Brown, and they were still talking, and I don't think they got called nearly enough for pass interference. One thing I also noticed was after both of Kaiser's touchdown runs where he flapped his arms like wings, I thought that was great to see because he was talking a little bit of his own. And then their linebacker, I can't pronounce his name, number 8, the redhead, he got right in Kaiser's face after Kaiser scored, and he couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah, there was definitely some gamesmanship going on in that game. And you don't see that out of a Notre Dame team a whole lot. And I kind of thought that was I didn't mind it. I didn't think anything was over the top, but it was fun to see Notre Dame. The Notre Dame's like a stereotypical fundamental, like doesn't get into into that stuff a whole lot. It was fun to see a Notre Dame team have that fire and have that gamesmanship within the game where they weren't exactly drawing 15-yard penalties or anything, and you never want that, but it was fun to see a Notre Dame team kind of deliver that back, and Kaiser flapping his wings after each of his touchdown runs it was just wonderful. It was fun to watch, and obviously the result made it fun to watch too.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think anything was over the top or across the line. I thought that everything they said or whatever was justified. And I'm glad they didn't draw any 15-yard penalties for taunting or unsportsmanlike conducts. I don't believe any of those happened. So I'm happy that they kept it in check to that point, but I was happy to see a little bit of jawing going on from guys in gold helmets.
Yeah, it was fun to see. I don't know a lot about him, but Temple coach Matt Rule, what do you think about him as a coach?
I think he's obviously doing a great job at Temple. He's going to be quite a hot commodity this offseason, especially with the number of jobs opening up in Miami, and now Virginia Tech's going to be open. South Carolina. There's a lot of big jobs opening. I think he's going to be a hot commodity. I'm not sure he's going to end up leaving Temple or not, but there's going to be offers out there for him. I know he's a former Penn State linebacker, and he really knows his stuff. He's really turned that program around. I think when he took over it, they were a 2-win program, and now they were 7-0 coming into Saturday night, ranked in the top 25, their first ever matchup between when they were ranked and their opponent was ranked, I think. So he's got that program going in the right direction, and kudos to him for that, but I'm not sure how long he's going to be at Temple. I think he's got bigger and better things in his future. Right.
I watched him on game day, and, they interviewed him, obviously, and I didn't know anything about him. Outside of the fact that the Temple Owls football team has had a resurgence under his watch. I just his charisma and the way that I think he said had a Twitter AV of Young Jeezy, just the way he kind of related to those players and stuff seems like he's a fun fun coach to play under.
If that was his Twitter picture, I like him a lot more now. I'm a big Jeezy fan, man.
I just think it's fun when I can't imagine that Brian Kelly's like real up with pop culture or anything like that. I think that those coaches that are able to relate to their kids a little better like that. And obviously I'm a teacher, so that type of thing, and a coach. So that type of thing really appeals to me, but I just thought that was, I don't know, just fun to hear about a guy that's kind of like the way I try to be with my players and my kids at my school and things like that.
Yeah, I'm real curious now that you bring that up about what Brian Kelly would be like as far as that goes. I remember, and this is totally off topic and nothing we plan to talk about, by the way, but watching the 30 for 30s about the U, and when Butch Davis took over there, and he was like asking guys what they listened to before games, and they were talking like 2 Live Crew and like these rappers, and he's like, who are those guys? Like, I'm really curious what Brian Kelly knows as far as like who Jeezy is, or when does the next hot rap album come out? I'm really curious if he would know that stuff. And none of this matters for football, but it sparks curiosity in me.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that a little bit matters for football as far as, you know, if you go into
recruiting and such. Yeah. But I mean, wins and losses on the field, I don't think it necessarily matters if you know the next top 40 song.
Yeah, no, not at all. But yeah, just kind of interesting to think about. If any of our listeners have anything to add on that about knowing anything about Brian Kelly, tweet one of us. It'll be at the end of the show. But anyways,
yeah, I would love to know who Brian Kelly's favorite rapper is.
Any thoughts? Like, who do you think?
See, I would have to think. I don't know.
I could see Brian Kelly doing the Hotline Bling dance.
See, I can't see Brian Kelly as a Drake guy. Brian Kelly is way too fiery for that. Drake is so mellow and he's just not that kind of guy. I don't think he's a Drake guy. I could see him being an Eminem fan maybe because he's fiery and gritty. And by the way, Matt Rule, the Temple coach, does have a picture of Jeezy holding up a Temple football jersey as his Twitter picture.
Yeah, he had Jeezy in to like talk to the team. I don't know if you saw that interview or not.
I did not. What would Jeezy say to a college football team?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, Jeezy's I believe he's from Philly, if I'm not.
No, he's from Atlanta, I believe.
Is he? I don't know. But it was some sort of message about, I don't know, coming from nothing. And obviously Temple is really, as a football program, they've come from nothing. They had like 2 and 10 seasons and things. So I think he related something like that to, you know, their resurgence. And I don't know. Anytime you can get a rapper, I don't know how relevant Jeezy is.
Extremely relevant, Ben. Come on. And Jeezy is from Columbia, South Carolina, and then he moved to Atlanta.
Oh, nice.
So he's not from Philly. He should have had Meek Mill speak to the team.
Yeah.
Could have talked about getting blasted by opponents.
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, before we digress way too far out of football talk, Notre Dame at Pitt this weekend. Initial thoughts.
I think it's going to be another challenge. I think that Notre Dame has to go on the road again, face another good team. I know Pitt just fell out of the top 25 following their loss to North Carolina at home on last Thursday night. But I think it's going to be another challenge. I think Notre Dame's going to be able to go in there and win. Don't get me wrong. But I don't think it's going to come easy. I don't think Pitt's quite as good as Temple is, honestly. I think they are a borderline top 25 team. And I think Temple's probably a top 20 team realistically. But they're going to go in for the fight. Notre Dame is coming to town. And I think that means a ton to all these kids on other schools. When Notre Dame comes to town, it's a big deal. It's also a big deal when you go to Notre Dame Stadium with all the history and all the glory that place holds. It's a big deal for kids to go in there and play there. And that's why Notre Dame gets everyone's best shot each and every week, because they are playing the University of Notre Dame.
Right. And Notre Dame's got that national recruiting base so I don't think a lot of people realize that a lot of times when you play Notre Dame, you're playing against kids that regardless of, even if you go to, you know, a Temple or a Pitt or a USC or a Stanford, you're playing against the same kids you played against in high school, because I mean, Notre Dame's really good in especially like Eastern Philly or Eastern Pennsylvania and like Philly and New Jersey, and then out west also. So a lot of these teams that Notre Dame plays, and I'm sure Pitt draws from Philly and things also. A lot of these teams that Notre Dame plays, a lot of those opponents, you got to imagine, are pretty familiar with each other. So that kind of adds a layer to, I don't know, I guess it's an extra storyline in the game, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and look at Will Fuller, the hero from Saturday night. He's from Philly. Notre Dame has 3 starters from the Philadelphia area, I think I saw.
Yeah, so that had to be I wonder why that wasn't talked about a little more. I mean,
I saw some stuff, but I didn't see quite as much. I thought I would have seen more about it after the game, after he had the game-winning touchdown grab with 2 minutes left. I was surprised I didn't see more on like the hometown hero coming through on his home turf, essentially. But I mean, it doesn't matter much now as long as they got the W. That's all that really matters. But I thought it would have been a cool story after, and I think it was a fitting way to end that game. The whole time. And I talk about this with Browns games as well. I knew how Saturday was going to end. I just knew Notre Dame was going to find a way to win that game late, just the same way I know the Browns are going to find a way to lose games no matter what every week. So I knew something like that was going to happen. I never thought they were going to lose. I got worried, but I didn't think that, they're done, because I knew how clutch DeShone Kizer is, and I knew Will Fuller was going to do something huge.
It's incredible, the narrative of Notre Dame games. I mean, I feel like if you and I were more experienced writers, we could have our Notre Dame template, saved, and then just plug and chug information into our template and have a nice little Notre Dame article because it seems like they play every game the same way.
Yeah, and this season is eerily similar to me to the 2012 season that saw them lose to Alabama in the national title game. If you remember that Pitt game, they were down 20-6, and I actually touched upon this a little bit in my last write-up for Campus Pressbox because Pitt's the next opponent. And Everett Golson led that comeback, and then they won in overtime after Pitt's kicker missed. And they had a lot of close come-from-behind wins. And a little-known stat that really has become a little more public after this week is, since Brian Kelly took over in 2010, Notre Dame leads Division I-A in comebacks in the fourth quarter with 13. It happens all the time.
Who's that say something about? I mean, is it good? I'm torn about that stat. I saw that stat also. I'm torn about whether that's a good thing or not. I mean, I feel as if some of those teams that they came back to beat, they shouldn't have had to come back to beat.
Wins are wins, though, and I do feel good about it because it means the team is resilient. They never give up, and they can find a way to win. And it's not as if all these wins are coming against terrible schools like maybe Marshall's 12 has, but they're coming back against teams like USC or other Power 5 programs that have business being on the field with Notre Dame, and they're able to come back and win. Now, maybe Temple's not the most illustrious school, but they have big comebacks against other teams. Even if you look at the Clemson game, they were down. They had no business being in that game after the first quarter, but they found a way to make it a game. They had business winning the game at the end, had no business in the first quarter. That speaks a lot to how much these kids believe in each other down the stretch and believe in the coaching staff as well.
Yeah, I mean, we went through a time at Notre Dame where they were losing, these close games and double overtimes and things. I think back to the Charlie Weiss era. I remember the same year as the Bush push. Earlier in that year, they lost to Michigan State in overtime. I was there.
Wasn't that the game where Michigan State planted the flag on the field? And
they missed the 50-yard line? Yeah, that's the game.
Yeah, I thought so.
That's the game. I was sitting in the end zone when I believe it was the first play of Notre Dame kicked a field goal, if I remember correctly, and they ran it might have been like the second play of overtime, but they ran a regular speed option to the right and flipped the ball out to that running back, and he went untouched in the end zone. And I was at both Notre Dame losses that year, by the way, Michigan State and USC. So, but regardless, we used to lose games like that, to USC later in that season, and not too long ago we lost a game to Navy in double or triple overtime or whatever it was, and so I mean, obviously it's a welcome sight to see Notre Dame actually winning these close ones. It's just that, like I've touched on and like I've said to you many times, it would be nice if not every week was a close game. It would be nice if it was just if anytime. I mean, I guess every week isn't a close. I mean, we did beat Texas by 35 or 38 or whatever it was.
Yeah, that's your blowout for the year. Be happy with it, Ben.
Gosh, one a year. Okay, I might have to be an Ohio State fan.
Oh, stop it!
I take it back. I take it back immediately. That was more of a shot at Ohio State other than me switching my fandom. But anyways, so how do you think this Notre Dame Pitt game is going to play out? You said it's going to be a close one. What other things do you think we'll see from Notre Dame?
The one thing that really concerns me the most is covering Tyler Boyd. Kavari Russell has been real up and down this year, and we know he's made 2 huge plays the last 2 weeks to really seal games. The interception of Cody Kessler trying to hit Juju Smith-Schuster in the fourth quarter, and then the interception of PJ Walker to seal the game this past week. I really think he needs to step up and try and cover Tyler Boyd. I think Tyler Boyd is the best receiver that Notre Dame is going to see this year. And I think that the first half suspension of Elijah Shoemate could really hurt them in the passing game.
Yeah, we talked about this before we went on air, but that targeting call was just brutal. Absolutely terrible for Notre Dame. I mean, you played defensive back. Did you not? Or were you on offense?
In high school, I played defensive back. College, I played offense.
Okay. As a defensive back, what? I mean, I can understand maybe calling a penalty. Can't they call a targeting penalty and still not throw him out of the game?
No, targeting comes with an automatic ejection. They review it, and if the review is reversed, then the penalty's erased as well. So there's no yardage influence as well, and the guy gets to stay in the game. But I don't know what else he's supposed to do there.
Yeah. I mean, at the very least, I think that rule needs to be looked at again. I mean, I know that there's been a lot of speculation about it and a lot of debate. I mean, if you're going to review it, maybe you still call targeting. Maybe you give them that penalty. But the real issue, obviously, I think that was a 3rd down play. So it gave them a
fourth. That was a fourth down play.
It was a 4th down play. Okay. So it obviously gave Temple another opportunity to score. Moving forward, the real issue is that Elijah Shoemate is out for the first half of that Pitt game. I mean, obviously giving Temple new life to score is bad enough, but then when you are penalizing a kid for just trying to hit a receiver so he doesn't make a catch in the end zone.
And there was no malicious intent, in my opinion. He was going for his waist. It's not his fault gravity brought him down. He aimed low. He didn't aim high.
He was basically aiming at that guy's like shins or knees whenever he first went for him. I don't know. That's obviously there was helmet to helmet contact, but not anywhere near intentional whatsoever. And it's rough that we, as Notre Dame, have to play without Elijah Shoemate after losing Drew Tranquil earlier in the season and, being thin in the secondary already, to play without probably your most consistent guy at the back of that secondary for a game against what was just a top 25 opponent is going to be a challenge for Notre Dame for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely very costly, and I think that's a rule that needs to get looked at. In my opinion, at least of the targeting calls I've seen, this is the second worst one. The worst one would be in the Michigan State game when a Michigan linebacker got pushed into a Michigan State player on the ground and they threw him out for targeting.
I fortunately didn't get to see such terrible officiating on that one, but
it was terrible. There's no other way to describe it. And something needs to be done because way too much power is being put into officials' hands. They have the power to throw someone out if they so feel.
It's wow. All right. Well, anyways, just to wrap up our Notre Dame Pitt talk, I also think it'll be a nice close game. I don't know that this one will be quite as close as the Temple one. I think maybe it'll be close into the fourth quarter, and then with Notre Dame maybe scoring beginning to mid fourth quarter to kind of put it away, go up a couple of scores, and then hanging on from there. So I'll go Notre Dame, and I'll go 28-17, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think it'll be something along those lines. I'm thinking maybe 35-21, something like that. I think Notre Dame wins, but I think it's a game in the fourth quarter.
I think you're right. All right. So moving right along. So obviously, a lot has been made of Notre Dame's quarterback situation. Talk to me a little bit about Deshaun Kaiser. Obviously, he's come into a loaded situation, kind of what seemed like a can't win situation, I think is fair to say, for him, and really looked better than anyone could have ever imagined. What have you seen from Deshaun, and what strikes you about his play up until this point?
I think he's done a great job maturing so far. When he came into the game against Virginia, we saw what he was made of extremely quickly, obviously, because he had no time. He had to rescue the Irish after they fell behind, and he ultimately did. And as time goes on, I'm starting to believe ice water truly does flow through his veins. Even though he didn't have the greatest of games against Temple, I think he had probably his best bad game that he could have had. He rushed for 143 yards, obviously helped out by that 79-yard touchdown run, and he almost threw for 300 yards. He was at 299, I believe. The only thing that killed him was his red zone production. I believe he was 1 of 7 in the red zone. The only completion was that 19 or 17-yard strike to Will Fuller to win the game with 2 minutes left. But I've seen a lot of maturity out of him. The way he handles himself, he's extremely mature. He's very professional. He knows what he needs to do. And that's even evident when he talks with the media. He's a very professional guy. And I think that's great for him. It bodes really well for Notre Dame. I'm very happy with how he's played thus far, and I can't wait to see how good he is in the future. And I think that could be a little bit of controversy for Notre Dame.
Yeah, we'll get to that controversy here in a second, but I'm 24, and it blows my mind. I'm pretty sure he's 19.
Yeah, he's 19. I'm actually looking at it now. His birthday will be January 3rd, so right after Notre Dame wins the semifinal game, he'll turn 20.
I love it. I love the confidence. But anyways, for a kid like that, I'm not even going to call him a guy. For a kid like that to be as poised as he is, as adult acting as he is, it's really refreshing to see. Kind of thing that I think you expect from a kid that goes to Notre Dame. Those are the type of kids that they kind of go for. Those kids that have kind of grown up and they're kind of, men to an extent already. So he definitely fits that bill. And I got to listen back to a recording of a week or so ago. Brian Kelly was on Mike and Mike in the morning. And I don't know if you got a chance to listen to that or if you caught that at all.
I did not.
But they were talking about, they kind of asked the same question about Deshaun that I asked you. And Brian Kelly was like, well, they asked him when Brian Kelly knew that Deshaun was going to be as special as he was. And Brian Kelly said, well, obviously we had a tough situation when Malik went down in the Virginia game. And I was talking to Deshaun on the sidelines, and I'm looking at this kid in the eyes, and I looked at him in the eyes and I saw, this kid is not afraid. This kid's not afraid of anything. And he had obviously really not much preparation for that situation. He did not look rattled on TV. And Brian Kelly, who knows the kid probably better than any of us do, didn't look scared to Brian Kelly. He's like, I looked at him right smack in the eyes, and I was like, okay, well, we could have something here. And I thought that kind of spoke volumes for a guy, I don't know, that's as close to Deshaun Kaiser as Brian Kelly, to just, even in that terrible situation, to have that confidence in Kaiser just right away, right there on the fly.
Yeah, and I would have to agree with what you said. Obviously, I have a great confidence in him as well. He's really earned that, I feel. He's made very good decisions for the most part. We saw a couple poor decisions against Temple, and we've seen a few here and there, but he manages the game extremely well. He's a better athlete than I thought. I think we saw that this past weekend against Temple with his running abilities that I didn't think he quite had. I still don't think he's as good as Malik Zaire is on the ground, but I think he's got a huge arm. He can make all the throws. And I know I sound like an NFL draft scout saying he can make all the throws. It's one of the worst phrases in scouting. But
Yes.
he has a very good arm. He's accurate. He's smart, which is huge. He makes his read. He doesn't just throw the ball up for the most part. I know we saw that once in the Temple game, which was a bad decision and really cost them. But I'm very happy with how he's played, and I can't express that enough.
Yeah, he doesn't have, like, even in the Virginia game where he very well could have just gotten the snap, and as soon as someone got near him, he could have just started and taken off and started running. That play that eventually won him the game with Will Fuller catching that long pass, he had to hang in the pocket for, a solid 2-3 Mississippi before he could get rid of that. And he just has that pocket presence that you wouldn't expect a kid that has only started, I don't know how many games he started now, 5 or 6. And he has active feet in the pocket, but he's not like a Johnny Manziel who's of the past, who just kind of looked to run before he even looked to pass if number one guy isn't there. So that's been what I've been most impressed with, his willingness to let the play develop and trust that big, great offensive line that's in front of him.
Yeah, you're right. And taking it back to the Virginia game, if you remember the play that set up the Will Fuller strike, when he had to roll out to his right and he could have easily taken off, but he kept his eyes downfield and he hit CJ Procise over the middle, and Procise picked up like 20 yards and put him in position for not only the Fuller strike, but they were in near field goal range at that point. Right. So he did a great job there, and he's been able to do that a lot.
And even the interceptions he's thrown, he hasn't really thrown. First of all, he's done a good job overall of taking care of the ball, and he hasn't thrown like that head scratcher interception. There was that one interception against Clemson where I think they might have fooled him on a zone blitz or something. But other than that, like, he's had interceptions where balls were, debatable pass interference where the ball got batted up, and interceptions like that where it's like, okay, that's football. You kind of live with it to an extent. He hasn't really had too many of those really bad decisions whatsoever.
Yeah, and the one that sticks out is, as far as not being a bad decision that I think he gets too much flack for, is the one where he was trying to hit Corey Robinson in a fade against Georgia Tech. He threw it to Robinson's outside shoulder, and Robinson just failed to adjust to the ball, and the Georgia Tech DB made a great play to catch it. That's one, in my opinion, that's not his fault, but he's going to take the flack for.
Right. So, like what I've seen, I think we're both in agreement that we've liked what we've seen from Kaiser so far, which brings me to my next question, is whenever Malik Zaire gets healthy next year, Malik Zaire, they went with Malik Zaire after Everett Golson transferred because obviously he was the only quarterback who had any experience, and he didn't have a ton. Can you argue that Malik Zaire should be the starter after what Kaiser's done this year, barring Kaiser just absolutely falling flat on his face the rest of the year? Do you think you can even make the argument for Malik Zaire coming back as the starter?
You can make the argument because there was a reason he was the starter over Deshaun Kaiser to begin with. He wasn't there by accident. He's a very good football player in his own right, and we saw that in his limited sample size. I mean, the kid went out there, he beat LSU, and that LSU team with a lot of the same guys looks like a pretty good shot to make the college football playoff this year. He smoked Texas. He played great in that game, and he didn't have the greatest game in the world against Virginia, but before he got hurt, Notre Dame looked like they were about to pull away, and they had all the momentum. And then as soon as he got hurt, the momentum just was sucked out of the Irish and went right into the Cavaliers. So you can make an argument for Zaire. I think it's going to be a very interesting spring and fall camp, though.
Yeah, Brian Kelly loves to play multiple. I mean, he loved that Zaire Golson thing in the bowl game last year, and I think that's before Golson transferred. That's what we were looking at for this year. Do you think that's something that we're going to see with Zaire and Kaiser, or do you think he goes with one or the other?
I truly hope not. I'm not a big fan of 2 quarterback systems. I don't believe they work. If you look at programs that have it, it's very rare that you can win with it. I know a lot of people that are for it point to when Urban Meyer was at Florida and he had Chris Leak and Tim Tebow, but Tim Tebow was nothing more than a battering ram, and Chris Leak was the quarterback there. If you look at Ohio State now, when they've been balancing between Cardale Jones and JT Barrett, they haven't been good. They've been good enough to beat the subpar teams they play, but they haven't been the team that you expect Ohio State to be this year.
Yeah, I think that the year that Chris Leak and Tim Tebow were at Florida, I think when a 2 quarterback system works, which is very rare. Maybe the only time it really has worked is that time that we're kind of talking about right now. But I think when it works is when the two quarterbacks do, I guess, radically different things. And I don't think Zaire and Kaiser are very similar. I think Zaire is kind of built a little bit more like a running back than Kaiser is. Kaiser's a little shorter and maybe even a little heavier. I don't know what I just said. I think Zaire is shorter, a little more stout than Kaiser is. And Kaiser's kind of he's not a string bean, but he's lankier, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I think Kaiser's listed at 6'4", 220-ish, and I think Zaire is listed at 6'1", 220. So Kaiser's definitely taller, and Zaire is definitely a little thicker and built to run the ball a little bit more. And I think he's a little quicker and probably faster as well.
I would tend to agree. So, man, it's gonna be a difficult decision for Brian Kelly for sure. You think you see one of these guys transfer if they're left out of the starting job?
I sure hope not. I would hate to see that. The one player I could see transferring, and I hate to say this, but would be Brandon Wimbush, because I think he's seen that there's two guys in front of him that are really, really good, and he's very good in his own right, but where does he fit in? And I would hate to see any of them transfer, because I think all three of them are extremely talented and capable of being elite quarterbacks, but I don't know how all three of them fit in. I'm very curious to see how this plays out over the next year.
Yeah, well, Wimbush, he was supposed to get that red shirt this year, which would have given him, he would have been in like a similar position as Zaire was. I think he would have had a couple of years of eligibility once Zaire at least was gone. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the three of those, but regardless, when you're looking at three quarterbacks, obviously Brandon Wimbush isn't proven by any stretch, but in the little bit that he's played against Notre Dame, he's shown some really impressive things. You and I have talked about the absolute 60-yard rope that he put lasered right down the field to Will Fuller, that he actually overthrew Will Fuller, which is pretty difficult to do. I didn't think
it was possible, honestly.
I believe Will Fuller said before the season that Everett Golson could not ever overthrow him, and Malik Zaire could on occasion and at least always get close. And then Brandon Wimbush came out and did it. So that tells you about Wimbush's arm. Good problem to have, I guess you could say, but you almost feel bad. You not almost feel bad. You do feel bad for whichever of those guys kind of gets left out of the equation, because they all have proven that they can play.
Yeah, definitely. They've been able to prove that they deserve the chance to be the starting quarterback at Notre Dame, but there can only be one, in my opinion. And I'm not sure Brian Kelly shares that opinion with me, but you can't have two starting quarterbacks. You just can't. I think that it is going to be either Kaiser or Zaire. I have no idea, and I can't lie to you saying that I do have an idea of who it's going to be, because I'm just as clueless as the next guy. And I will call you out for lying if you try and tell me that you have any idea who it's going to be, because I know that you're full of crap. But I do worry about one of them leaving, truthfully.
Yeah, we're on the same page there. So to my next question, which is similar, who would you rather have leading the Irish this year, Everett Golson or Deshaun Kaiser?
I would rather have Deshaun Kaiser. I think we saw what Everett Golson was able to do at Notre Dame in this situation, the situation he would have at Notre Dame now. I think Kaiser's the better man for the job. And I don't have any bad blood against Everett Golson. I wish him the best at Florida State. And sometimes I find myself rooting for him and want him to do well personally, because he played for Notre Dame, a team that obviously I love for the past 3 years. And I have good memories of him playing for Notre Dame, obviously leading the team 12-0 and to a BCS national title game. But I think Deshaun Kaiser is performing better than Everett Golson would be in this situation.
I think you're right. And Damien asked me this whenever I podcasted with him a couple weeks back. He asked me why Everett Golson is doing better this year at Florida State than he really did at Notre Dame. And my answer was, well, obviously Everett Golson has matured since then, more experience to draw upon. But other than that, something wasn't right when Everett Golson came back after he sat out that year. It just was, there was something was damaged there, I think. And as soon as things started to go, I mean, everything was fine up until Florida State. And then you had Florida State, then you had some injuries, and then things started to go bad for that Notre Dame team with Everett Golson. And he just didn't look like the same guy. He didn't look quite as invested. And then, he was kind of getting phased out a little bit. I have a tough time thinking that even if Everett was still around, I have a tough time thinking that Notre Dame would be sitting where they're sitting with Everett Golson as the quarterback. It just seemed like a change of scenery was good for Everett. And, I'm glad that things have worked out for him thus far at Florida State, although that quarterback that they had play, whose name escapes me at the moment, played unbelievable, just coming off the bench when Everett had that concussion this weekend. But
Sean McGuire had a good game for Florida State.
There it is. So it'll be interesting to see if Golson's still the starter or if they're sharing time or what goes on. But regardless, I think that Kaiser's the guy. I'm with you on that one. To throw a couple numbers at you. So in Everett Golson's 2012 season, his first year as a starter, he was completing a little under 60%, 59% of his passes, and he had 12 touchdowns and 6 interceptions for the season. Deshaun Kaiser is completing nearly 65%, and he has 11 touchdowns and 6 interceptions thus far. Deshaun Kaiser's rating is 152.1, and Everett Golson's was 131.0. So I think the numbers back up that Kaiser's been better, and I think that mentally, I think Kaiser's better than Golson showed at any point during his career at Notre Dame.
I agree with you there. I think Kaiser is not scared to make the big play, and that year in 2012, Everett Golson was really more of a game manager that let his defense win the games. And here we're seeing Notre Dame score 41 points against USC and 60 plus against UMass. Yeah, they've had a couple low-scoring games with Temple and Clemson, but they put up 30 on Georgia Tech, who is supposed to be a good defense. They've been able to score, and Kaiser's been able to take shots down the field. Maybe there's a little bit better of a receiving core now with Will Fuller, but I would have to go with Kaiser. I think he's doing more, and Everett Golson was really more of a game manager at that point in his career. And I think he's a little bit better now because, one, he has matured. I think, two, a change of scenery did him wonders. 3, he's got the second best running back in college football in Dalvin Cook, and I think that offense might be a little bit simpler than what he was running at Notre Dame.
Yes, yeah, for sure. I think, and I think that's what Everett wanted. He wanted to go to a place where it was a little more NFL-like, a little more, I don't know, simplistic. Change of scenery was good for him for sure. But to not beat a dead horse, we're going to move on, and we're going to segue a little bit away from Notre Dame and talk about you and I's favorite college football team, other than Notre Dame, obviously, the Ohio State Buckeyes. And if you're a first-time listener, that was heavy sarcasm.
You'll find out in the coming moments of this podcast how heavy that sarcasm was.
Yeah, we'll try to talk about them without trashing them too much. We don't want to do that, but
do we? We do.
Should we? Should we? That's another. Moving on. So JT Barrett, OVI this weekend, blew a .08, which is obviously right at the legal limit. Obviously, I think, if he would have blown a .07, he still would be in trouble because he was 20. And then he gets suspended for one game. And then it came out today that he was losing a scholarship for a semester. Thoughts on JT Barrett, his punishment, his 1 week, his one game, but I guess maybe 2-week or who knows, suspension. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that the loss of scholarship might be a little harsh. I think a 1 to 2 game suspension would have sufficed for me. I find it incredibly ironic. He allegedly gave a speech to the team Thursday talking about not getting in trouble over the bye weekend, and he goes and gets in trouble. I did also hear that he will have the ability to regain that scholarship, and it's really just summer financial aid. So it's not as if he's a walk-on right now, and that talk can settle down. I think Urban Meyer is trying to flex his muscle because the day before, I'm not sure if you caught that Clay Travis video, just ripping Urban Meyer for never punishing anyone ever.
Yeah. Rough situation for JT Barrett. And, I feel for the kid a little bit because I feel like especially I'm just going to go ahead and say any male that has gone out and had a couple of drinks and, sometimes you're like, should I drive right now? Should I not drive right now? I think I'm okay. Yeah, I don't know. So that's clearly what was going through JT Barrett's mind. It's something that I think a lot of guys, when they drink, they struggle with because they don't want to look as if they're for lack of a better term, a lightweight. And they want to look as if they can handle things and they can, they don't want to depend on someone else. I get that. That's kind of a male complex. Unfortunately, JT Barrett is the quarterback of the Ohio State Buckeyes. So maybe in his thought process, he should have gone through another layer of, should I get behind the wheel or not? And it's not like he was blitzed either. It was 0.08. I mean, they say that a couple two alcoholic beverages gets you to 0.08, depending on how fast you drink them.
I think because of his height and weight, I think it was closer to 7 for him, someone said.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And I think it was 0.09, not to correct you, but not that that's a huge difference.
Right.
Especially for someone under 21.
Yeah. And that's the thing that bugs me just a little bit. I mean, it's kind of been swept under the rug that he's not even of drinking age. Like, I kind of want to know where he was. And I wish TMZ would have gotten a hold of some pictures of him because that was Halloween weekend. That was October 30th. I really wanted to see JT Barrett like going through a field sobriety test in like a Scooby-Doo costume or something like that.
See, I think he dressed up as Tommy Reese.
He didn't knee a police officer or anything, did he?
Not that I've heard, but I think he did enough to beat Tommy Reese for the night.
Oh, Tommy. But I don't know. So rough situation for JT. Obviously he's gonna sit out this game. Are they at home against Minnesota? Do you know?
I believe so. I do believe so. I think it's an 8:00 game at the Shoe, but I will double check that and let you know.
All right. But anyway, so he's sitting out this next game against Minnesota. I hope that's right. But anyways, so in your opinion, does this distraction of JT Barrett's suspension and loss of scholarship, does that have any hangover, pun intended, for this Ohio State?
Terrible.
For this Ohio State Minnesota game? Or do you think Ohio State goes out and takes care of business?
I think they're going to take care of business. I would be very surprised if they walked away from this game with a loss. I wouldn't be upset about it, but I'd be surprised. I think the offense is going to go back to struggling with Cardale Jones at quarterback. I think JT Barrett fits the system much better than Jones does. But yeah, I don't see them losing here.
I don't see them losing. I think it's going to end up being kind of close. I don't know what the spread is, but I'd probably be tempted to take Minnesota because they're probably going to be fairly heavy underdogs, you would think. I think it would be worse if Cardale hadn't already played in 8 games this year. And I'm looking at Cardale Jones' stats, and I mean, he's completing 63.2% of his passes, which if I had to bet prior to seeing that, I would have thought it would have been less. He also does have 5 picks, and he's only throwing for about 158 yards a game. Part of me wonders, I've thought a lot about why Urban even played Cardale. I think he was kind of put in a rough position when Cardale went out and, tore up for those 3 games, essentially. But now that teams have a way to game plan for Cardale week after week, obviously Cardale hasn't performed as well. I think last year he got away with throwing to Devin Smith when he got in trouble a lot. And a lot of his inflated passing numbers were due to the fact that he had a really elite receiver who at one point in his, I think, senior season was averaging like 30 yards a catch or something like that. So I can't believe that it took this long to get to JT Barrett for Ohio State. I don't know how you feel about that, but what was Urban? Why did he wait so long?
I think that there was a promise between Urban Meyer and Cardale Jones, and I know Urban Meyer won't touch upon this talking. He'll deny it to his deathbed. But I think Urban was worried that, Braxton might never be the same with his arm. I don't know how healthy JT is going to be. I can't lose Cardale Jones to the NFL because I might have nobody. I think that was Urban Meyer's train of thought. And he said to Cardale, if you come back, you'll be the starter. I don't think that I fail to believe him denying that. I truly think he made a promise to Cardale, and he'll deny it until he's blue in the face. But I think that's what happened. And for the record, Vegas expects a tight game. Ohio State's favored by 23.
A tight game. Oh boy. Yeah. So I don't think it's going to be a 20. I mean, Minnesota's coming off. They lost to Michigan by only 3, and they probably should have won. There was some questionable clock management at the end of that game.
Yeah, I think Minnesota was thinking, why tie when you can just lose? So
yeah, exactly. Tying's like kissing your sister. So, anyways,
exactly. Who needs overtime? We can lose in regulation.
There you go. Or even, maybe just snap it with 18 seconds and get a couple cracks at the end zone instead of just one.
That was extremely confusing to me, the way that was handled. They forgot that the game was almost over. They ran the play like it was in the middle of the third quarter.
Yeah. But we digress. So
so much tonight.
Yeah. I feel like every time you and I talk, there's trees of conversation. These trees just grow out in every which way. And we've got a really good body of work by the time we're done, but it gets kind of lengthy. So anyways, we'll try to stay on the Cardale Jones, JT Barrett. So last question I want to ask you about Cardale and JT. So when JT's suspension is over, do they go back to JT, or has he kind of screwed up his chance?
I think that Urban Meyer is going to try and flex his muscle and make JT earn the starting spot back. I think he realizes he's under scrutiny because, people have realized he's not a tough coach. Like, he lets criminals on his team. I know the Clay Travis video went viral, and it could not have been timed any more perfect because it came out, I think, Friday at like midnight. It came out, and JT Barrett got arrested 24 hours later, And he talked about how Janoris Jenkins got arrested twice within a month after Urban resigned at Florida. And he was quoted as saying, if Urban were still the coach, I'd be on the team. He knows what it takes to win. He had Aaron Hernandez on the team. And the list of guys that gotten in trouble at Florida were just unbelievable. And he didn't do anything about it. And I think he's trying to make up for that. And he's trying to flex his muscle on JT. I think the Buckeyes are better suited with JT Barrett at quarterback. But I think it's going to be a while before we see him again. And that really does not bode well for Ohio State fans.
Before or after the Michigan State game? Or during?
I think it's during the Michigan State game because that game is a potential loss. I do think Ohio State will win that one, but that's a potential loss. And I'm not sure Cardale Jones can beat Michigan State right now.
Yeah, obviously
it's gonna be close, and he's gonna have to pull the trigger again.
Yeah, I think obviously what Urban was probably going for when he started Cardale Jones setting aside perhaps an agreement that you'll be the starter and you'll have the opportunity to keep that job. I think probably what he was going for was that whole, if I pound with Ezekiel Elliott, that opens up the over-the-top game. Or if I throw the ball down the field over the top with a guy that has a rocket arm like Cardale Jones, even just taking a couple shots opens up Ezekiel Elliott. And I think their lack of ability to connect on some of those deep plays that they were hitting on a year ago when they had a guy like Devin Smith is kind of what has hurt them so far. So then you kind of got to go back to the nickel and dime guy, which is JT Barrett. And he can pick up. I mean, it's against an Ohio State offense, it's hard pressed to consistently stop JT Barrett or Ezekiel Elliott consistently for less than 4 yards. I mean, all you got to do in football is pick up an average of 3.5 yards or 3 1/3 yards on every play, and you're going to score a touchdown. But
3 in a cloud of dust, man.
Exactly. So I think when Cardale wasn't hitting on those passes, I think that's when things started to go south for the Ohio State offense. That's why they've struggled so much. I don't know. So prior to the season, people were looking at Cardale Jones like a first-round draft pick. I think in the right offense, I think Cardale Jones is still a pretty decent quarterback, but I just don't think that Ohio State offense is the right offense for a Cardale Jones. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think he'll make an NFL roster and he'll compete at least, but it'll be interesting to see what happens after that when he gets NFL athletes all around him and things like that. But I'm with you on the JT Barrett coming back either for or during the Michigan State game. I think bottom line is that this OVI that he's accumulated, put on his record, is really came at a pretty bad time for them. But
it couldn't have come at a worse time for them. They had finally played well in their win against Rutgers. They finally had momentum, and then it just all gets sucked up and is gone.
Yeah. So to our last point, then we've talked a lot about the Notre Dame quarterback conversation, and now we've talked about Ohio State. Coming into the season, there was a lot made of the fact that Ohio State had won the national championship with their third string quarterback. And now we've seen Notre Dame do as well, arguably. I mean, longer body of work, but obviously not to the point of a national championship yet. So we've seen Notre Dame do comparably well. Comparably well to that with their third string quarterback entering spring ball at the very least. Who has the better problem as their quarterback situation?
I think the better problem. Well, I think both of these are problems. I think Notre Dame has more talent at the quarterback situation. I do think Cardale Jones is talented, but I don't think he's nearly as good as he was during those final 3 games last year. I think you talked about having Devin Smith and an outstanding offensive line and running game really, really helped them a ton. And it's also not to discredit him, but they made the offense for him extremely simple. He rarely threw between the hashes. He didn't have to make very complex reads. They basically handed the ball off to Ezekiel Elliott and then said, hey, Cardale, why don't you throw this as far as you can and Devin Smith will run and catch it. That was their offense. I think he's not quite as talented as people think he is. JT Barrett, I think, is a great fit for that offense, but I don't think he's necessarily a pro quarterback per se. Braxton Miller, I never thought was a good quarterback. I thought he was one of college football's best athletes, but I never believed in him as a thrower. I thought he was always a runner and a great athlete, but he's not a good thrower. That being said, I couldn't even name you who the third string quarterback is right now. I know Braxton Miller technically is, and he's going to be the backup when JT's suspended. But if you look at Notre Dame, they're 4 deep because Everett Golson left, and then they've still got 3 dudes behind him that can ball because they're 6-1 with their third string quarterback right now. That's impressive, and I don't care who you are.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, and I don't think I can put it any better than how you put it. So I'm not gonna beat a dead horse on that one.
And actually, I have one more point upon that.
Okay.
And Ohio State had Ezekiel Elliott. He was one of the best running backs in college football last year. Notre Dame's starting running back is a kid that was recruited as a safety and was a special teams player and slot receiver last year. Their top 2 running backs tore his ACL and failed out of school. So they're not only on their third quarterback, they're on their third tailback, and that is never talked about.
You raise great points that, if I wish that some other of these Ohio State fans opened their eyes a little bit to the type of, I don't know, the type of things that Notre Dame has gone through to get to where they've been thus far. Some guy tweeted at me this weekend I tweeted something about how Deshaun Kaiser, if you're keeping track, that's a third string quarterback that just led that touchdown drive. And an Ohio State fan inevitably tweeted at me. I mean, I was taking a jab at Ohio State, let's be honest. But anyways, tweeted at me and said, call me when he wins you a national championship. I was like, well, call me when yours plays good for more than 3 games. So I don't know. I think that you're right. I think that what Notre Dame has done in their situation, what Deshaun Kaiser's done, is up there with what Cardale Jones has done. It's definitely in the same conversation, if not even better, just because of the longer body of work and the schedule. I mean, I obviously understand that going out and beating Wisconsin and Oregon Alabama first and then Oregon was no small task, but longer body of work for Deshaun Kaiser, I think, may trump that just a little bit, or at least puts him in the same conversation. So we'll leave it at that, unless you have something to add.
Absolutely not. I am just thrilled that I got to talk about Jeezy on a podcast tonight, Ben.
There we go. I never thought when we started today that we would be talking about who Brian Kelly's favorite rapper was. I'm glad that was at the beginning, because hopefully everyone who listens to this podcast gets to hear that and gets to weigh in. If you don't have anything else, I guess we can wrap this up. Are you good?
I'm good to wrap up, man.
All right. Well, I had fun again, as I always do. Thank you to our listeners for listening. This was episode 33 of the Campus Pressbox podcast series. Danny, tell the audience where they can find you.
You can find my writing on either Burning River Baseball, where I write about the Cleveland Indians, or on Campus Pressbox, where I blabber on about Notre Dame and other things. And you can find me on Twitter at DCunninghamCLE.
Similarly, you can find me on Twitter at BBeldenCLE. That's BBELDEN. Lots of people like to try to put an ON at the end. And you can find my Notre Dame musings and writings and my contributions to the mock college football playoff on Campus Pressbox. And my Cleveland sports writing, I mostly write Cavs for Northeast Ohio sports blogs, although I may just have to write a Browns article here in the near future.
Don't do it to yourself, man. And actually, before we go, I have a bone to pick with you about your voting. I saw Notre Dame all the way down at 9th.
I think I kind of messed that up. I don't know. I was put on the spot real quick. I was about the last person to submit, and I knew everyone was waiting on me, and I didn't really, I don't know. I think I kind of hastened my way through that a little bit.
I mean, Stanford almost lost to Washington State, and Notre Dame beat Temple. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was an error, but it wasn't an egregious error, because Notre Dame's going to make up for it if they beat Stanford anyways. So yeah, I hear your bone there, but oops, I don't know.
Also, Ohio State in the top 4, really? Come on.
Ohio State, don't pick a bone with me. Everyone else had Ohio State first. I thought putting them third, I was going to start a riot. I mean, it's incredible, the people that tweet me and tell me how dumb I am on a weekly basis for voting Ohio State not number 1.
It's unbelievable that people just think Ohio State's number 1 because they were good last year. They're not number 1 for their body of work now.
Right. And I was the only one who picked LSU first. Just throwing that out there. Everyone's real impressed with Clemson, and as am I. That's why I voted him too. But I don't know.
Baylor's got a couple first place votes too.
Yeah. Bottom line is that the teams that people are talking about, they're going to get a chance to prove themselves. So to an extent, a lot of it's trivial, but I don't know. We'll see how it all plays out.
Yeah, and except I do think Ohio State has a loss in their schedule, though.
I think it might be coming as well, but we'll keep that. We'll wait for that to happen before we actually talk about it.
Oh, we will talk that night on the podcast here if that happens. I know we will.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening. Once again, had a lot of fun. Make sure you check out Campus Pressbox online. Check us out on Twitter and check us out on iTunes and all of that good stuff. Thanks for listening. Looking forward to talking with you again.